Picture a man who stripped every illusion bare. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher who called existence itself suffering. He had an even harsher view of marriages. To marry is to step into a cell willingly. The door closes and suddenly your rights shrink to shadows while your duties grow like iron chains on your back. Society sells you fairy tales of happily ever after. But Schopenhauer saw marriage for what it is. A biological trick. A lifetime contract signed under chemical hypnosis. Look around you. Half of marriages collapse with a 50% divorce rate. The rest limp on in silence. Dead bedrooms, erased identities, quiet desperation behind smiling faces. But here's what nobody tells you about why this happens. According to Schopenhauer, the thing we call love isn't some divine blessing, but it's your DNA hijacking your brain. It tricks you into reproducing. And marriage is the institution that locks you into that biological programming long after the chemicals wear off. This is Schopenhauer's clarity about the cruelest deception nature ever sold us. Let's start with what you've been sold. Marriage is the ultimate goal, the completion of your life story, the path to lasting happiness and deep fulfillment. Disney movies, romantic comedies, all push. Social media too, all pushing the same narrative. Find your soulmate, have a wedding, live happily ever after. But Schopenhauer saw through this delusion centuries before social media made it worse. What's the reality of modern marriage? 40 to 50% end in divorce. But that's just the ones brave enough to escape. How many more are trapped in Schopenhauer's legalized misery? Legalized misery means staying together. For financial reasons, social pressure, or fear of starting over. Watch married people at restaurants. How many are actually talking? How many are scrolling their phones, avoiding eye contact, existing in parallel rather than together? Schopenhauer predicted this. He understood that marriage forces two fundamentally incompatible things together. The temporary biological drive to pair bond and the permanent legal bind, the obligation to remain bonded. It's like signing a lifetime gym membership based on how you feel after one good workout. The endorphins fade. The initial motivation disappears, but you're still locked into paying the price day after day, year after year. And there's something even more insidious happening here. Marriage doesn't just fail to deliver happiness. It actively destroys the very qualities that made you attractive. Your independence becomes codependence. Your mystery becomes familiarity. Your passion becomes routine. But most people don't see this coming because they don't understand what love actually is. Here's Schopenhauer's most devastating insight. Falling in love isn't spiritual. It's biological warfare against your rational mind. All love, however, wears the mask of heaven, is rooted in the dirt of sexual impulse alone. This isn't romantic, but it's true. What you call chemistry is literally chemistry. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin flooding your brain to override your logical decision-making processes. Your DNA doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about reproduction, and it will hijack your consciousness to achieve that goal. Think about how irrational people become when they're in love. They ignore red flags, they overlook truths. They make life-changing decisions based on feelings. They promise forever based on temporary brain states. They commit their entire future to someone they've known for months. Schopenhauer called this the will to live, manipulating individuals for the species' benefit. Your personal happiness is irrelevant to evolution. You're just a vehicle for genetic transmission, and love is the drug that makes you cooperate. But here's where it gets really cruel. Once the biological purpose is served, once you're locked into the marriage contract, the chemicals that created love naturally diminish. The passion fades, the obsession ends, the magic disappears. Now you're left with the reality. Two people who may not actually be compatible, locked into a legal and social arrangement based on a temporary brain state that no longer exists. And this is where Schopenhauer's pessimism becomes prophetic. He predicted that most marriages would become exercises in mutual tolerance at best, active suffering at worst. Not because people are evil, but because the foundation, romantic love, is built on quicksand. The person you fell in love with was partially a projection of your brain chemistry. When that chemistry normalizes, you discover you're married to a stranger. Someone with different values, different goals, different ways of being. Someone you might not even like if you met them today. Which brings us to marriage's most devastating cost. The emptier the mind, the louder the noise it craves. But the sharper the mind, the more it seeks silence. For only in silence does thought sharpen like a blade. Schopenhauer wasn't just talking about sound, he was describing mental chaos. The chaos that comes from sharing your life with another person. Here's the untold truth about marriage. Every decision becomes a negotiation. Every preference becomes a compromise. Every desire must be filtered through someone else's needs, moods, and opinions. where to live, how to spend money, what to do on weekends, whether to have children, how to raise them, which friends to see, what shows to watch, even bedtime. Even the temperature of the house becomes a matter of negotiation. Your life is no longer your own. Schopenhauer understood that mental freedom requires actual freedom. The philosopher needs solitude to think clearly. The artist needs space to create authentically. The individual needs autonomy to become who they're meant to be. But marriage demands the opposite. Constant consultation, perpetual consideration. Perpetual consideration of another person's feelings. The death of spontaneity in favor of coordination. And it gets worse over time. What starts as voluntary accommodation becomes expected sacrifice. Your partner doesn't just want consideration, they demand it. Your independence becomes selfishness. Your need for space becomes rejection. The very qualities that once made you attractive are gradually eroded by routine. Schopenhauer saw this as psychological suicide. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. For it is only when he is alone that he is really free. But marriage makes solitude selfish and freedom threatening. Your need for alone time becomes evidence that something's wrong with the relationship. Your desire to pursue individual goals becomes abandonment. Your very essence becomes a problem to be solved rather than a gift to be celebrated. And there's something even more sinister about how this happens. It's gradual, imperceptible. You don't notice your world shrinking until you realize you can't remember the last time you made a decision without considering someone else's reaction. You become half a person trying to be part of a whole when you were already complete, which brings us to what you lose in the process. Arthur Schopenhauer spent his life alone, and it made him one of history's greatest philosophers. His solitude wasn't isolation, it was intellectual freedom. A precondition for reading good books is not reading bad ones, for life is short, but marriage makes everything urgent except what matters most. Your partner's needs become more important than your growth or passion. Their crises become your emergencies. Their moods become your responsibility. Watch what happens to married people's ambitions. The artist stops creating because their partner needs attention. The entrepreneur abandons the risky venture because their spouse wants security. The intellectual stops reading philosophy because their partner finds it boring. This isn't sabotage, it's the natural result of merging lives. When you're single, your time is your own. You can spend 4 hours reading, 6 hours writing, 8 hours pursuing a passion project. You can follow your curiosity without explaining yourself to anyone. But marriage turns your time into shared time, your energy into shared energy, your focus into divided focus. And here's what Schopenhauer understood about genius. It requires selfishness, not cruelty, but fierce protection of self. The fierce protection of your inner life, the willingness to prioritize your growth over others' comfort, the courage to disappoint people who want you to be smaller than you are. Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. But marriage demands you aim for targets everyone can see. Conventional success. Social respectability. Shared goals representing lowest common denominator. The married person becomes a committee. Every decision filtered through multiple perspectives, watered down by compromise, delayed by consultation. Meanwhile, the single person moves with the speed of individual clarity. This is why so many of history's greatest minds remained unmarried. Nietzsche, Kant, Beethoven, Newton, Tesla. They understood that extraordinary achievement requires extraordinary focus and freedom, and extraordinary focus requires freedom from ordinary obligations. But there's an even deeper cost to marriage that most people never consider. All satisfaction, or what is commonly called happiness, is really and essentially always negative only and never positive. Schopenhauer understood that happiness is mainly the absence of suffering, and marriage, he observed, is a guaranteed source of continuous low-level suffering. Not dramatic suffering, something worse. The quiet erosion of peace through constant emotional maintenance. The death by 1,000 compromises. The slow strangulation of joy through routine conflict. Modern psychology confirms what Schopenhauer suspected. Married people report higher levels of stress, anxiety, and depression than single people. They sleep worse, they have less energy. They experience more chronic issues. Why? Because emotional labor never ends. You become responsible not just for your own emotional state, but for managing, soothing, and accommodating someone else's. Their bad day becomes your problem. Their insecurities become your responsibility. Their happiness becomes your job. And here's the cruel paradox. The more you try to make your spouse happy, the more impossible the task becomes. Because happiness can't be outsourced. It can't be provided by another person. It can only be generated from within. But marriage creates the illusion that your partner's happiness is your responsibility and vice versa. This leads to endless cycles of blame, guilt, and resentment. Schopenhauer called this the hedgehog's dilemma. Two hedgehogs trying to stay warm will get close enough to share heat, but poke each other with their quills. Then they separate again. They'll move apart to avoid pain, but then get cold. They spend their lives in this dance of intimacy and distance, never finding the perfect balance. This is marriage in a nutshell. Too close and you hurt each other. Too distant and you feel disconnected. There's no sustainable middle ground because you're trying to solve a biological problem with a social institution. And it gets worse over time as passion diminishes. What starts as passionate love becomes familiar irritation. The cute quirks become annoying habits. The mysterious becomes predictable. The exciting becomes routine. But society keeps telling you this is real love. The death of passion is called maturity. The loss of excitement is called stability. The erosion of joy is called commitment. Schopenhauer saw through these euphemisms and understood the deeper deception. He understood that what people call lasting love is often just two people who've given up on the possibility of genuine happiness and settled for familiar misery. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. This is an antisocial misanthropy. This is the recognition that authentic selfhood requires space to breathe, think, and exist without constant negotiation. But our culture has demonized solitude deeply. Being alone is seen as failure. Choosing solitude is seen as selfishness. Preferring your own company is seen as pathology. Yet history's greatest minds understood something different. Solitude isn't the absence of connection. It's the presence of yourself. It's the opportunity to develop your own thoughts without the constant influence of someone else's opinions, moods, and needs. Schopenhauer's solitude was his power. His most productive years were his most solitary. While his contemporaries were managing marriages, raising children, and attending social obligations, he was revolutionizing philosophy. He was exploring the deepest questions of human existence. He was creating work that would outlast every marriage of his era. The present moment is the only reality, but marriage keeps you trapped in managing futures and shared pasts. You lose touch with the immediate experience of being alive in favor of coordinating two lives into one acceptable narrative. In solitude, you rediscover what Schopenhauer called the will, your authentic desires unclouded by the need to accommodate someone else. Your real values uncompromised by the necessity of finding middle ground. Your genuine interests unedited by fear of boring or disappointing a partner. You can't give what you don't have. You can't love others authentically if you don't know yourself completely. You can't contribute to the world if you're constantly diluting your energy through the management of one person's expectations. The wise have always said the same things, and fools who are the majority have always done just the opposite. And what do the wise understand about relationships and love? That they work best between two complete people, not two halves seeking completion. That love flourishes in freedom, not captivity. That the best partnerships are between individuals who choose to share their fullness, not their emptiness. But this level of completeness can only be developed in solitude, where you learn to entertain yourself, discover your own thoughts, and develop inner resources that matter. The man who walks alone walks faster and freer. This isn't a consolation prize for people who can't find love. This is recognition of the superior path for those who value authenticity over approval, growth over comfort, truth over fantasy. Marriage is society's attempt to make permanent what nature intended to be temporary. It's the institutionalization of a biological drive that serves a species, not the individual. But here's the part most people never confront. Even when the cage is visible, many still walk inside. Why? Because loneliness feels unbearable. Society has conditioned you to see solitude as failure, when in reality solitude is freedom. The man who stands alone can shape his destiny. The one who chains himself to false promises hands his freedom to another. Which life is harder? Which is truly more painful in the long run? Schopenhauer once argued that solitude sharpens the mind while society dulls it. Marriage, then, is the ultimate dulling force. It reduces the fire of individuality into ashes of compromise. You may keep your body alive, but your spirit becomes a ghost, haunting the life you thought you wanted. Many only realize this too late, when they look in the mirror and see not who they are, but who they sacrificed themselves to become. Think of the quiet despair of countless men and women who remain locked in marriages they despise, fearing the judgment of family, the shame of society, or the weight of starting over. They perform love like actors repeating tired lines in a play no one enjoys anymore. The curtain never falls, the act never ends. This is the tragedy Schopenhauer spoke of. the prison disguised as paradise, where your own silence becomes your jailer. And yet not all is hopeless, for within the harshness of his view lies a hidden power. When you see love for what it truly is, when you pierce the illusion, you gain the freedom to live differently. No longer chasing ghosts of eternal romance, you begin to see value in truth, in clarity, in temporary flames that burn bright without the expectation of lasting forever. In this there is liberation, a kind of quiet strength. Imagine approaching relationships not as contracts, but as experiences. Not as promises of eternity, but as moments of connection to be lived fully, without deception. This doesn't cheapen love, it makes it real. It strips away the fantasy of permanence and leaves you with something raw, honest, and human. To love without illusion is to love without chains. To love without contracts is to love without fear of betrayal. Schopenhauer's warning, then, isn't to despise love. It is to despise the lies built around it. To resist the machinery of society that convinces you to exchange your freedom for an illusion. He wanted men and women to see clearly, even if that clarity hurts. Because clarity, though painful, sets you free. Illusion, though sweet, binds you. Ask yourself, which would you rather live with? Painful truth or comforting lies? The answer lies in your courage. Most will choose the comforting lie, because truth burns. It strips away dreams, dismantles fantasies, and leaves you naked before reality. But for those who dare to embrace it, a new life opens. A life not defined by false expectations, but by authenticity. A life where happiness isn't chained to rituals and contracts, but discovered in freedom, self-mastery, and the courage to walk alone if necessary. And isn't that the paradox? To lose illusions feels like loss, but it is in fact gain. To walk away from the altar of false promises is not weakness, but strength. For the man who can stand apart from the crowd, who can resist the seductive pull of the herd, is the one who truly owns himself. And self-ownership, Schopenhauer believed, is the rarest and most powerful form of freedom a human can ever attain in a lifetime. Now imagine a world where people saw marriage for what it truly is, where men and women entered relationships with clear eyes, without the fog of chemicals, without the pressure of culture, without the illusions of permanence. Would society survive, or would it crumble, stripped of its favorite lie? Perhaps that's why the illusion persists. And so, the choice remains yours. To live in chains and call them love, or to live in freedom and bear the weight of solitude. One path offers comfort but kills the soul. The other offers struggle but preserves your spirit. The world will always push you toward the cage. Only you can decide if you'll step inside.